and Letitia Tisha Scott went head-to-head felt like a shark circling its prey. And by the end of that little coffee shop meetup, it was clear somebody got bit. And it wasn't Nell. Stay locked in because I'm going to break this all the way down. And trust me, the way the truth came out had even producers rolling that bean footage, and we all know when producers have to step in and roll. The tape, it's about to get messy. Now, let's start from the top because Tisha came walking into that little meeting with Nell like she had it all figured out. And to be fair, she looked stunning. Hair laid, dress on point, makeup flawless. She was rocking this mustard olive kind of color, which, let's be real, is not a color everybody can pull off, but she did. And that's the thing about Tisha, right? She always shows up looking like $1,000,000. But looking good is one thing. Walking into a situation with a false sense of confidence is another. Because while she was sipping on that caramel macchiato, Nell Fletcher was already sitting, there like a calm storm, ready to put everything on the table. And I have to say it, Nell didn't waste a second. She came straight out the gate, calling out Tisha about her behavior at that NDA fiasco, and especially about running up on her husband, Chris Fletcher, with her hands all in his face. Now here's where it gets juicy. Tisha looked shocked, like she wasn't expecting Nell to start with that. But hold on, let's rewind, because wasn't it Tisha herself who once made the rule that if any of the women had issues with each other, they should come directly to each other instead of running to the group? Exactly. That's the very rule Tisha put into play, but the moment Nell decided to use that same playbook, suddenly Tisha was caught off guard. And you could see in her confessional, she was already backtracking, saying she didn't even remember it going down like that. But come on now, Kimmy already clocked her a few scenes back for doing the exact same thing. Hands flying, walking up on Chris, laughing it off like it was no big deal. So Nell wasn't lying, she was just putting a mirror up to Tisha's face. And here's the thing that killed me. Tisha could have squashed the whole thing right then and there with one simple line. All she had to say was, "Girl, I didn't even realize I came off that way. Maybe I had too much Don Julio, my bad." Boom. Accountability, done. Everybody could have sipped their coffee and moved on. But no, instead of just admitting she might have been doing the most, Tisha doubled down, acting like she had no idea what Nell was talking about. She was appalled, she was defensive, she was really trying to play dumb, but that's when you know somebody hit a nerve. And Nell? Child. Nell was calm, collected, and circling like a shark. She said, "When was the first time we ever put your husband's name in our mouths?" And that's when Tisha fumbled, because she brought up Atlanta, saying Nell and Chris were dragging Marceau's name. And that's when Nell pulled out the receipts. Because let's be real, it wasn't Chris or Nell who dragged Marceau into the mix, it was Marceau who used Chris as his alibi. Whew, talk about backfiring. And you already know the producers love a good messy moment. They rolled back the footage, showing Marceau himself telling Tisha he was with Chris Fletcher in Atlanta, while Tisha was crying in the car, asking where he was and who he was with. That footage was the nail in the coffin because it proved Nell wasn't lying. Chris didn't put himself in the situation. Marceau dragged his name in there trying to cover himself. And you could see it in Tisha's face. She cracked. All that confidence she walked in with? Gone. Now Nell didn't even have to raise her voice. She didn't flinch. She didn't get emotional. She didn't let Tisha throw her off balance. She just sat there calmly, telling her side of the story, saying, "Look, I was with my husband, I knew where he was, and I even had him bring me in takeout from the Atlanta fish market." Meanwhile, Tisha was huffing, puffing, and eventually storming out like she was the victim. But let's be real, walking out like that only made it look like she didn't believe Marceau herself. Because if she really believed her husband, she would have sat there, calm as ever, sipping her caramel macchiato and letting Nell talk. And let's not forget, this ain't even the first time Tisha tried to flip the script on Nell. Y'all remember that lunch scene with Nell and Marceau where Tisha leaned across the table asking Nell if she had ever dealt with infidelity? That was Tisha poking, trying to get under Nell's skin. And you know Nell clocked that from way back. That's why when this coffee shop meetup happened, she wasn't about to let Tisha spin it. She stood her ground and she did it flawlessly. Now, let's talk about Marceau for a second because his name was all over this mess without him even being there. It was his lie, his alibi that dragged Chris Fletcher into this whole situation. And if we're being real, Marceau has a long history of playing these kinds of games. Remember the whole back photo situation? The one that looked just like Marceau's. Head, shoulders, and back, And everybody, including Wanda, Tisha's own mama, was out here saying, that looks like Marceau. Even Wanda didn't buy his story. And now, here we are again, with another alibi falling apart. And this is where, I have to say it, Tisha needs more therapy sessions. Because for somebody who claims she doesn't believe the rumors, she sure does act like they cut her deep. If you don't believe it, then don't let it shake you. Sit there, sip your drink, and move on. But the fact that she stormed out, raising her voice, getting emotional, it just shows she still doesn't fully believe Marceau. And that's the real issue. Meanwhile, Nell was cool as a cucumber. She even said it herself. Dealing with Tisha feels like dealing with one of her grown kids. That's the level of patience she had. And honestly, she won the entire scene just by staying calm. The polls even showed it. 72% of viewers said they were on Nell's side, while only 4% sided with Tisha. And let's be real, that's not a small margin. That's the audience speaking loud and clear. But let's not ignore the ripple effect. Here, because if Tisha is struggling this much with her marriage behind the scenes, you already know this isn't the last time it's going to blow up on camera. Marceau's games keep dragging other people into the drama, and Tisha keeps trying to defend him until the walls close in and she cracks. And every single time, it makes her look like she doesn't believe him either. Now, let's be real. This whole situation didn't just show us Nell and Letitia's issues, it highlighted a bigger problem within the group. These ladies have been around each other long enough to know when something is personal and when something is just messy. But the way things unfolded proves that lines are getting blurred. Instead of handling things like grown women behind the scenes, it turned into another public blow-up that everybody and their mama now has an opinion on. And let's not act like the fans aren't eating this up, because social media has been going wild with clips and commentary since this aired. The funny thing is, Letitia kept trying to act like she was above the drama, but her body language told a whole different story. You could literally see the frustration all over her face, and the more she tried to keep calm, the more it felt like she was about to snap. Nell, on the other hand, wasn't backing down either. She stood on what she said and wasn't about to let Letitia rewrite the narrative. This is where things always get heated.